Hi, my name is Verena. At my own housewarming, my celebration, my new beginning, my sister served me soup laced with poison mushrooms. She smiled when she handed me the bowl. She smiled 30 minutes later, too, until I started choking. And when she realized I wasn't just being dramatic, she panicked. But not out of guilt, out of fear. Because she knew exactly what she put in that pot. What kind of sister looks straight into a camera, poisons your food, and still believes she'll get away with it? And maybe a better question, why did no one else ever stop her? I hadn't heard Sable's voice in nearly 6 years, but I recognized it instantly. Too cheerful, too polished, like a veneer glossed over something darker. The message came on a Tuesday morning while I was rearranging bookshelves in my new home. My phone buzzed once, and her name flashed across the screen like a specter I hadn't invited. "Hey, Verena," she chirped in that tone that always made me feel 12 again. "I heard you finally closed on that house in Alberta. Congrats. I was thinking, maybe I could help you plan a housewarming. I mean, who better, right? Who better?" I stared at the screen, replaying the message once, twice, then again with the volume lowered as if the meaning might change. I hadn't told her about the house. Someone else must have. Elowyn, maybe, or someone from the old neighborhood. Either way, Sable always had a way of making something mine feel like hers. Still, something in me, maybe the stubborn girl who used to whisper affirmations in the mirror after Sable crushed them, paused. I didn't owe her anything. But part of me wanted, not closure exactly, just peace. Maybe letting her help this once would be an olive branch. 3 days later, she arrived. Not for brunch, not for a casual tour, but with an entire box of floral decor, printed place cards, and a fresh blowout. "This corner needs something softer," she said within 10 minutes, already moving my chair to the side and placing a vase of pink peonies where my cactus used to be. "Let me just zhuzh this up a bit." I stood there, arms crossed, watching my minimalist living room become something off an Instagram home influencer's feed. She didn't ask, just did, like always. "Sable, I kind of like the space open," I said gently. She blinked at me, smiled that diplomatic smile of hers. "Of course you do, but let's create something welcoming, something people want to remember." I let her keep zhuzhing. By the second day, she had a guest list printed and pinned on my fridge, half of whom I didn't even know. She'd set up a group text. She'd named the event Verena's Comeback Soiree. "Come back?" I asked. "Well, you've been so quiet these last few years. It's time everyone sees you again." What she meant, of course, was that I was back in a space she could control. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen sipping chamomile tea, staring at the mock-up she'd drafted for the table setting. Rose gold utensils, personalized menus, everything screamed Sable. I opened the cabinet where I had stored the ceramic mugs I'd spent weeks crafting, each etched with a unique phrase I'd hand-picked for my guests. I'd wrapped them carefully in soft linen and tucked them neatly, ready to display on the drink table. The box was gone. "Sable?" I called out, knocking softly on the guest room door. She answered groggily, "Yeah?" "Did you see a cardboard box with mugs inside? It was right above the pantry." "Oh, those old things?" She yawned. "I replaced them. They didn't exactly match the aesthetic. Don't worry, I got cute ones from HomeGoods, already wrapped." I paused, heart thumping. "They were handmade," she shrugged. "I figured you wouldn't mind. I signed them from Sable, for the branding." "It'll look great in photos." That night, I didn't sleep. I wanted to storm in there, demand she undo everything, call off the party, take back my space. But years of conditioning, of being the quiet sister, the one who didn't make a fuss, held me still. "This is my house," I whispered to myself in the dark. This time, I can draw the line. But I didn't. Not yet. By Friday morning, the living room looked like a boutique wedding reception. The dining table was draped in blush linen, the windows twinkled with battery-powered fairy lights, and every chair had a lavender-scented sachet tied with satin ribbon. Sable moved through the house like a stage manager, tweaking candles, adjusting pillows, her phone in hand to catch every angle. I stayed out of her way. I reorganized the pantry, restocked the guest bathroom, wiped down the patio chairs, anything to keep my hands busy while I avoided confrontation. The only space untouched was the entryway shelf. I quietly placed the guest book there, hand-bound, one of the few things that still felt like mine. I pressed my fingers to the cover and exhaled. I could feel something building, creeping through my gut like a warning. Later that afternoon, Sable glanced up from her phone. "Oh, I almost forgot. I'll cook tomorrow. I'm thinking mushroom bisque, like Mom used to make." I turned slowly. "You're making the soup?" "Of course. Everyone remembers how much you loved it. It'll be nostalgic." I should have said no. I should have reminded her I had an allergy. I should have told her to leave. But instead, I said, "Sure, that'll be nice." And in that moment, I ignored the voice in my head, screaming that this was the start of something I wouldn't be able to undo. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee the next morning, the kitchen was already humming with Sable's energy. The smell of sautéed garlic mixed with something earthier, richer, drifted through the house. I stood at the edge of the hallway, clutching the mug with both hands, watching her swirl something thick and creamy in a silver pot. She caught my reflection in the glass oven door and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. I got started early so the soup can really settle into its flavor. You remember Mom's mushroom bisque, don't you?" I nodded, cautiously stepping into the room. I remember it made my throat itchy. Sable waved a ladle in the air like it was a magic wand. That was years ago. And this isn't the wild kind. I picked Creminous, completely safe. Organic, even. I hesitated. She noticed. Her voice softened. Too much. "You trust me, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. And that pause, it stretched into something louder than any word I could have chosen. But instead of arguing, I just said, "Of course, it's your recipe." She grinned like she'd just won a bet and returned to stirring. "You'll love it. Everyone will." I excused myself to finish setting the guest room. As I walked past the hallway closet, something sharp pricked behind my eyes. A flash. Me at 8, in the woods behind our house, Sable daring me to taste a strange mushroom we'd found near a rotted log. "Just a nibble," she'd said, giggling. "Bet you won't do it." I did. 3 hours later, I was vomiting into a plastic bowl while she told Mom I'd eaten it on a dare. No mention of who dared me. In the present, I blinked away the sting and returned to the bedroom to arrange fresh towels. Folding them gave my hands something to do. Something quiet. By 10, the house was immaculate. The table was set with those shiny mugs she'd bought, the ones she'd claimed looked more professional. Her name was handwritten on each tag, from Sable. Mine appeared nowhere. Elowen hadn't arrived yet, but guests started trickling in around 11. First, our neighbor from across the street, then Sable's former coworker, then a couple I didn't recognize at all. I played hostess, smiled, directed people to the backyard, answered questions about the house like I'd lived there for a decade instead of 2 weeks. But something felt off. It wasn't just the soup or the guest list. It was the way people looked at Sable, like she was the sun and we all orbited her. I passed by the kitchen again and caught a snippet of her voice. She was talking to a group of guests who'd gathered near the island. "When we were kids," she said with a nostalgic chuckle, "Verena once ate a wild mushroom on a dare. Poor thing got so sick. I was the one who ran for help, screaming, barefoot through the woods." The group laughed, gasped, clutched their chests. I stood outside the archway, invisible. She hadn't run. She'd stood frozen while I choked on the porch, unsure what to do until our neighbor spotted me. That same neighbor drove me to the ER. Sable just cried and played the victim. Even now, she retold the story like a hero, like she'd saved me, and people ate it up. Back in the hallway, I gripped the railing harder than I meant to. The knuckles on my right hand went white. I released slowly, walked into the bathroom, and splashed water on my face. In the mirror, my reflection stared back at me, calmer than I expected. "You're not a kid anymore," I reminded myself. "You don't need her version of the truth." By noon, the living room buzzed with conversation. Wine glasses clinked, laughter bubbled. The front door stayed cracked open to let in the spring breeze. I caught the scent of Sable's soup again, thicker now, darker. She moved between guests like a swan gliding over still water, her voice lilting, her smile effortless. "You must be so proud of her," one woman said, nudging her shoulder. "You're such a great influence. She told me you helped with everything." Sable smiled. "Family's what matters." That was her favorite line, has been for years, and yet she hadn't called on my birthdays, hadn't attended my graduation, skipped the hospital visit when I had pneumonia at 29, but now she was what mattered. I kept moving, carrying a tray of lemon waters through the crowd. I smiled. I offered refills. I thanked people for coming. And the whole time, I watched her. The way she moved, spoke, claimed space like it had always belonged to her. At one point, she found me near the sliding door. "Oh, before I forget," she said, pulling me aside. I adjusted the playlist. Yours was a little mellow. I bit the inside of my cheek. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "This is your big moment. Let it shine." My jaw tightened. "I'll shine," I said, "just not in your reflection." She blinked, as if the words had surprised her, then smiled. "Oh, Verena, don't be sensitive. This is supposed to be fun." And then she walked away. Fun. That word stuck to the roof of my mouth like peanut butter. By 1:30, the soup was ready. I heard her call out, "Soup's on," like it was a punchline. People filtered into the kitchen with curiosity and compliments. "Smells amazing," someone said. I watched as she ladled the thick bisque into ceramic bowls. She handed me one personally. "Yours has extra," she said with a wink. I didn't respond. I took the bowl. I held it. I stared down at the creamy surface, steam curling like fingers. The smell was rich, nutty, familiar. And yet, I ate it. The moment the spoon hit the bottom of that bowl, something in me sank with it. I wasn't sure if it was instinct or memory, but a ripple of discomfort crawled up my spine before the soup even touched my lips. And yet, with all those eyes around me, all those compliments echoing off the walls about Sable's generosity and charm, I lifted the spoon anyway. It tasted fine, creamy, rich, layered with flavor. But there was an undertone, earthy, musky, one I hadn't expected. I told myself it was the herbs, maybe thyme, maybe something I didn't recognize because I hadn't tasted anything Sable made in years. I kept smiling. Not long after, Sable tapped her glass with a butter knife and called for attention. I turned slowly, watching as the conversations quieted. She stood at the center of the room like a well-lit portrait, elegant, composed, glowing from the praise of others. "I want to say a few words," she began, swirling her wine, "about my little sister." The words dropped like chilled water on my skin. Everyone turned toward me. I held my glass and steadied my face. Whatever she planned to say, I wouldn't give her the reaction she wanted. She's always been thoughtful, Sable said with a soft laugh. Quiet, reserved, a little stubborn maybe, but never lacking in heart. A polite chuckle rippled through the room. I didn't move. And I always knew, deep down, that she'd get here eventually. It just took her a little longer to find her stride. More laughter, not mean-spirited, but not kind either. I felt my shoulders tighten. My fingers gripped the stem of my glass a little harder. She's sensitive, Sable added with a nod and a syrupy smile, but that's always been her charm. I let out a breath through my nose, slow and sharp, the kind of breath you release when you can't yell. They clapped. Some smiled at me. I nodded in return, swallowing whatever I wanted to say, not because I couldn't speak, but because I knew she wanted me to. The room fell back into small conversations, plates refilled, music turned up a notch. That's when she approached. A woman in her late 50s, wearing a mint green scarf and a kind expression, stepped closer and placed a hand lightly on my arm. "You're lucky to have a sister like Sable," she said warmly. She told me how much she helped with the down payment. It must feel so good to finally have your own place. My stomach turned. "I bought the house myself," I replied, carefully. Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, I must have misunderstood. She made it sound like—" Her words drifted, evaporating in the space between us. She offered a smile, awkward and quick, then moved on to the dessert table. I stayed rooted. That was Sable's game, never an outright lie, just enough implication to steal the credit without ever taking responsibility. I needed air. I made my way to the kitchen, where the hum of the refrigerator and the clinking of glasses offered temporary shelter. I placed my hands on the edge of the countertop and leaned forward, breathing deeply. I remembered a science fair in 6th grade. I built a working windmill out of recycled parts. Our parents didn't come. Sable entered a watercolor of a sunset. No scientific component, just colors. She took first place. No one questioned it. When I asked why, my mom said, "Because hers was beautiful. You can't teach that." I remembered the time I got into the honors program in high school. My dad skimmed over the letter and said, "Well, your sister's focusing on real-world things, art competitions, internships." I was told I'd do fine, but not to get too confident. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They just never saw me. And now, here in my own home, I was still invisible under her spotlight. I took one more breath and rinsed my hands under the faucet, letting the cold water cool more than just my palms. She wouldn't win this time. When I stepped back into the living room, I was composed. My smile returned, not because I meant it, but because I chose it. Sable glanced my way. Our eyes locked. She tilted her head slightly, as if to say, "See? Everyone loves me." I tilted mine right back, just enough to say, "Let's see how long that lasts." Because if she wanted a show, I'd give her one, just not tonight. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding my breath until the room started spinning, not dramatically, not in some movie-style swirl. It was just a slow, quiet tilting of the world that made it harder to tell whether I was tired or something deeper had gone wrong. People were still mingling, sipping wine, nibbling on appetizers. Laughter rose and fell like waves in the background. I was drifting between conversations, smiling when I needed to, nodding at compliments I didn't fully register. Then came the pinch. Not sharp, not painful, just a curious tightening behind my jaw and a strange warmth along my neck, like my body was trying to whisper something I hadn't tuned into yet. I passed the hallway mirror and caught a glimpse of myself, rosier than usual, cheeks flushed. I pressed my fingertips against my collarbone and rolled my shoulders as if that could reset something beneath the skin. "Are you okay?" someone asked as they passed. Just warm, I replied, managing a weak grin. I picked up a glass of water from the console table and took a long sip, hoping it would clear the film that had started to gather in my throat. I blamed the nerves. After all, this was my first time hosting anything that wasn't on Zoom or limited to Eloin and me. But the feeling didn't fade. Instead, it crawled upward, tingling at the roof of my mouth, then sinking into my stomach like wet cement. As I moved toward the kitchen to steady myself, I passed Sable by the hallway arch. She reached out with a gentle touch to my shoulder, her manicured fingers brushing my dress sleeve as if she'd timed it perfectly. Don't overthink it, she whispered, leaning in with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. You always do. It was such a casual phrase, so normal, so perfectly ordinary, but it made something inside me still. Because it was the exact same thing she had said to me when I was 9, moments before I bit into that mushroom cap she dared me to eat behind the shed. That same mix of coaxing sweetness and knowing indifference. Back then, it led to a hospital visit. Now, it triggered a storm. I turned slightly, watching her glide away, greeting another couple with that signature Sable glow, like nothing could tarnish her. Like everything was always under her control. A heavy pressure started building behind my eyes, as if a migraine was trying to push its way through. My fingertips were damp. The air felt heavier, like the room had decided to shrink around me. Hey Verena, can I get the Wi-Fi password? Someone asked behind me. I tried to speak, but couldn't get the words to rise. I'll grab it for you, someone else offered, and I waved a thank you I couldn't verbalize. I moved faster toward the back of the house, past the guest bath, gripping the wall briefly when my balance shifted. No one noticed. I was too good at slipping through the spaces between attention. Inside the kitchen, I grabbed the edge of the counter. My breath felt too short for how slow I was moving. It wasn't panic. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even nerves. This was something else. My mind flicked through the ingredients I'd seen spread across the counter that morning. Cream, butter, herbs, mushrooms. Yes, she said cremini, but how could I be sure? I touched my throat again. Swallowing was harder now. My skin had gone clammy, the kind of cold that settles right under your shirt next to your bones. I needed to sit. But the stool felt too far. I just need air, I muttered, barely audible. I headed toward the sliding glass door, thinking maybe the backyard would help. Maybe space would reset whatever this was. I passed another guest who looked at me with a puzzled smile. Long day, huh? Yeah, I whispered. Little bit. But my knees betrayed me on the next step. I caught myself against the wall and kept walking, slow, steady, pretending this was just exhaustion. Each step took more focus. By the time I reached the kitchen again, looping around instead of heading out, I leaned against the fridge. The coolness of the metal didn't offer the relief I expected. I pressed my forehead to the door and whispered to myself, "This isn't just nerves. Something's wrong." And as the sound of laughter trickled in from the other room, I realized just how alone I was inside my own party. The refrigerator door was the last thing I remember leaning against before my knees gave way. I didn't fall gracefully. My body crumpled, heavy and uncoordinated, like someone had cut a string from the inside. A sharp clatter followed as a glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor beside me. I heard someone scream, one of the guests maybe, and footsteps thundered into the kitchen, voices rising in pitch. But everything felt muffled, like the world had dipped underwater. My vision was full of soft edges and darkening corners. Then, like clockwork, Sable was there. "Oh my God," she gasped dramatically. "She's having an anxiety attack." She dropped to her knees next to me and cradled my head against her arm. Her voice was panicked but rehearsed. I tried to speak, tried to say no, not anxiety. Something's wrong, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. My breath came in short, wheezy gasps. "She does this sometimes," Sable said, louder now, turning toward the guests who had gathered near the entryway. "She's sensitive, overworks herself, probably just overwhelmed." Someone handed her a cold cloth, and she pressed it to my forehead, but her grip was tighter than necessary. Her fingers curled around my wrist, not to comfort, but to control. She wasn't focused on me. She was watching the crowd. My eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. I could hear someone whispering nearby. Then another voice, clearer, firm, familiar. "Elowyn?" She pushed through the group, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me, wide with alarm. She dropped to the floor beside Sable and took my hand. "What happened?" she asked. "She fainted," Sable said smoothly. "She just needs to rest. I've got it under control." But Elowyn didn't buy it. I saw it in her face. "She doesn't faint," Elowyn said flatly. "She reacts to things. Where's her epinephrine pen?" "She doesn't need it," Sable replied, too quickly. "It's not that kind of situation." Elowyn ignored her and reached for my bag, which someone had set on the nearby counter. She unzipped the side pocket, the exact one I always kept the pen in. It was empty. Her head snapped toward Sable. "Where is it?" Sable blinked. "How would I know?" But something flickered in her expression, barely a second long, but I caught it. So did Elowyn. Without another word, Elowyn stood up. "We need to go, now." With help from another guest, she got me upright, draped one of my arms over her shoulder, and led me toward the front door. I heard Sable behind us, offering to call someone, to help, but no one was listening anymore. The car ride to the hospital passed in a blur. I drifted in and out of awareness, of Elowyn's voice telling me to hold on, of the cool leather seat beneath me, of her hand gripping mine tightly. The ER was sterile and overlit. Nurses rushed in, poking, checking, asking questions I couldn't answer. I felt a needle slide into my arm. The haze began to clear slowly as the medication kicked in. Air returned to my lungs like water to dry ground. Hours later, I lay in the hospital bed under dimmed lights, the machines beside me beeping steadily. My head still ached, but I could think again. Elowyn sat at my bedside, her jaw set like granite. "She stayed here last week, right?" she asked. I nodded. "For 2 hours while you ran errands?" Another nod. "She had access to your room." My fingers gripped the blanket. "She knew where you kept your medication," Elowyn continued. "I checked. Your drawer was picked. The lock is scratched." The realization landed like a blow. I tried to sit up straighter, but the IV tugged at my arm. "Oh, she took the key," I said hoarsely. "The spare key I kept hidden under the kitchen sink. She must have copied it." Elowyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. The weight of it sank into my chest. Not just the betrayal, but the strategy, the audacity of it. She hadn't just poisoned me. She'd planned it. Every piece fit together now. The party she insisted on organizing, the soup she insisted on making, the way she introduced herself as the savior when I collapsed. She wanted to control the story, the setting, even the aftermath. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even hurt. I was cold, focused. "She wanted to control the narrative," I said, staring at the ceiling, "even if it killed me." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like running from the truth. I wanted to face it. 2 mornings after the ER, I was making tea when the doorbell rang. Not the usual delivery chime. This one was longer, more deliberate. I opened the front door to find a man in a navy blazer holding a white envelope with gold-embossed lettering. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just handed it to me and turned without a word. Inside, on heavy, cream-colored paper, were the words, "Cease and desist." Sable's name appeared in bold. The law firm she'd hired. Expensive. Strategic. The letter accused me of defamation, emotional damage, and knowingly spreading false, harmful narratives about my sister. It called my behavior malicious, my version of events self-constructed, and demanded I stop harassing Ms. Sable Marlowe immediately. I read it 3 times. The first time, I felt my face go hot with disbelief. The second, cold with rage. By the third, I was calm, focused. Elowen arrived about an hour later, holding 2 coffees and her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw the envelope on the table, she lowered the phone slowly. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." I handed it to her wordlessly. She skimmed it, then slammed her coffee down hard enough for the lid to pop. "She's trying to shut you up. She knows you don't have legal backup. This is all posturing, pure intimidation." I nodded once. "It's not going to work." Elowen studied my face. "You sure?" "I'm done playing her version of polite." She let out a short laugh. "You sound like yourself again." I didn't answer. I was already pulling out my journal, the one where I recorded everything after the party. Dates, times, the soup ingredients I could remember, my symptoms, Sable's words. And then, one moment I hadn't thought much about until now. That whisper. In the chaos of the kitchen, as I was slipping in and out of consciousness, she leaned close and said, "It was just a little. You'll be fine." Not, "What's wrong?" Not, "I don't know what happened." She didn't sound confused or alarmed. She sounded like someone trying to downplay something they knew they'd done. I sat with that for a long moment. "She knew," I said aloud. "She knew exactly what she was doing." She said, "Just a little." Elowen looked at me, her expression changing. "That's not the kind of thing someone says by accident." "No," I agreed. "It's the kind of thing you say when you measured the damage before delivering it." That night, after dinner and some long silence between us, I sat at my desk and typed up my own letter. It wasn't a legal document. It didn't need to be. It was for Sable, and it was meant to be clear. I didn't start with a greeting. I started with facts. You poisoned me. You knew about my allergy, and you made a choice. You manipulated my party, my friends, my image. And when I didn't collapse quietly, you used the law to try to silence me. I've been quiet most of my life. You've told the stories, controlled the spotlight, rewritten the past. But not this time. I am not afraid of you. And the next time we speak, if we ever do, it'll be through attorneys. I printed it, folded it, and sealed it in a plain envelope. The next morning, I placed it on the front steps of her condo. No doorbell, no text, just left it where she would find it. When I returned home, I sat on my porch and posted a photo of the envelope on my private social feed. No names, no tags, just a single caption. Silence was never consent. Within minutes, I received 2 messages from old acquaintances, both women who'd known Sable through work or community events. One said she wasn't surprised. The other simply wrote, "If you need support, I'm here." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stared at the garden I'd planted 3 weeks ago, before all of this exploded. The lavender was starting to bloom. The basil hadn't taken, but the rosemary stood tall. Sable thought her version of events would bury mine. But the truth? The truth was louder than either of us, and I was done letting her edit my life. 3 days after I left that letter on her porch, I sat on the floor in front of the cabinet below the kitchen sink, sorting through batteries, old tools, and a box labeled Missy. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the low hum of the fridge. Elowen was beside me, legs crossed, laptop open on the counter, skimming through the archived feeds from the smart home system I'd forgotten I had installed months ago. At the time, it was more about peace of mind than paranoia. I never imagined it would become the key to breaking years of silence. "There's one labeled pantry angle," she said. I stood, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked over. The footage loaded slowly, grainy at first, then crisp. The timestamp read 2 hours before the housewarming began. I watched my own front door open, watched Sable walk in, tote bag on her shoulder, wearing that peach linen blouse she favored when she wanted to seem effortlessly composed. She moved through the kitchen like she owned it. Her hand reached into the bag, pulled out a small jar, then paused. She looked directly at the camera, not startled, just aware. Then she smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but it was unmistakably a smirk. She turned toward the stove, removed the lid from the soup pot, and tilted the contents of the jar into it, stirred, covered it again. Then she rinsed the jar in the sink and placed it back in her bag. I didn't speak. Elowen didn't either. We just sat in that buzzing silence that comes when reality catches up with suspicion. "You need to post this," she said quietly. "Not for revenge, for clarity." I nodded once. That night, I clipped the video to 15 seconds, just enough to show her opening the jar, her eyes on the lens, the moment her lips curled. I captioned it, "What's done in the kitchen won't stay in the kitchen." I didn't tag her. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. Within an hour, the video had been shared 28 times. Within 3, my inbox was full, some messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. I had no idea. "She always seemed so perfect. I'm sorry I doubted you." It wasn't vindication, not yet, but it was something close. The next morning, I was sipping coffee when I got a voicemail from a woman who'd attended the party. Her voice cracked halfway through. "My daughter said something odd. I thought I should pass it along." The recording followed, a small, clear voice, maybe 6 or 7 years old. "Mommy, remember? Aunt Sable told me not to eat the soup. She said it was grown-up soup and it might make my tummy hurt." I replayed it 4 times. Elowen listened beside me, mouth slightly open. "She warned a child," I said, my voice dry. "But not me." We sent the clip to my lawyer the next day. I didn't plan to sue, not yet, but I needed it on record, just in case. By the end of the week, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from a mutual friend. "Hey, not sure what's going on, but I just wanted to say I see you, and I believe you." A screenshot followed, a group chat we'd both once been in. Sable's name was no longer there. It wasn't loud, no big announcements. But people were backing away from her, slowly and quietly, like they'd just realized the fire they'd been warming their hands on wasn't as safe as they thought. Sable's Instagram went dark for 2 days. Her business email signature changed, no longer mentioning her PR consulting. And the comments, once glowing with admiration, now sat barren. No likes, no replies. She wasn't canceled. That wasn't the point. She was exposed. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way people expect when a lie unravels. I felt tired, but solid. That evening, as the sun dipped low through the kitchen window, I stood in front of the open shelves where I'd finally placed the mugs I made, the ones she had hidden, the ones I thought were gone. I wiped a fingerprint off one and smiled faintly. She tried to erase me, but now they all see me. The sky turned a burnt gold that night, just as I clicked upload. No filters, no edits, no captions this time. Just the uncut footage. Sable alone in my kitchen, removing the lid from the soup pot, pouring in the contents of a small jar with calculated calm, stirring, then glancing directly at the lens, and smiling. I added a brief text overlay at the beginning. No commentary, no context, just her. Then I closed my laptop and stepped away. By midnight, the video had surpassed 200,000 views. By sunrise, it was trending. People recognized the face. Sable had spent years crafting a carefully managed public image. Podcast guest, community fundraiser, brand collaborator. Her digital footprint was all charm and grace. Until now, screenshots of her smirk made the rounds like wildfire. Headlines followed. PR queen or poison chef. Hashtag soup scandal shakes Pacific Northwest influencer scene. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I didn't post. I just watched as the world finally caught a glimpse of the version of her I'd known all my life. The agent who'd once gushed about her elevated taste and effortless relatability dropped her within hours. One of her partnerships, the skincare brand she bragged about landing, released a public statement. "We are deeply disturbed by recent content and have chosen to sever all ties." For the first time, her reputation wasn't something she could spin. Still, she never reached out. Not a call, not a message, nothing. The silence from her wasn't new, but this time it was louder than ever. The only direct contact I got came from our parents. An email, cold and clinical. "Your decision to publicize a family matter has caused irreparable harm. We urge you to consider the long-term consequences of your actions." No mention of the hospital, no concern for my health, no acknowledgement that Sable had poisoned their daughter, just a plea to protect the family name. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Elowen with a single line. "They've picked their side." Later that week, I printed everything, screenshots, messages, medical documentation, and drove to the police station. Elowen came with me. She didn't say much, just kept her hand on my arm as I explained everything to the officer behind the plexiglass screen. He was older, with a trimmed white mustache and a face that didn't flinch when I mentioned family betrayal. When I handed over the flash drive, he inserted it, clicked play, and watched the same clip the rest of the internet had already dissected. After a minute, he paused and looked at me. "This," he said slowly, "isn't just drama. It's attempted harm. We'll process it as such." I thanked him, not because it felt like closure, but because it was finally someone with a badge, confirming that what happened mattered, that I mattered. 2 nights later, I posted one last message, no pictures, no dramatic hashtags. Just a quiet, direct sentence written for no one but myself. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted to stop her from destroying me. And with that, I logged off for the first time in weeks. I sat in the dim light of my kitchen where it all started. The house was still. No simmering pots, no rehearsed speeches, no floral arrangements crowding the space. Just me and the truth, and the quiet had never felt more earned. The air inside my house had changed, not dramatically, not with perfume or incense or some forced shift. It just felt still, quieter, as if it no longer held anyone else's energy but mine. No curated playlist humming in the background, no clacking heels on hardwood, no scent of oversalted soup simmering out of obligation. 2 weeks had passed since the video went viral. Long enough for people to move on to new headlines, but not so long that I forgot what it felt like when the truth finally had a stage. Long enough for the noise to fade, and for something gentler to return in its place. I was reorganizing the attic when I found it. A plain cardboard box shoved behind an old suitcase, covered in dust and sealed with tape that had long since lost its stick. I didn't remember putting it there. Probably because I didn't. This one had my grandmother's handwriting on the side. "For Verena, open when it's quiet." The moment I saw the label, my chest tightened. I brought the box downstairs and set it gently on the dining table, the same one Sable once tried to stage with faux greenery and her initials in metallic gold. I cut the tape, lifted the flaps, and there it was, her journal, the one she always wrote in during late afternoons with a cup of tea and her glasses slipping to the edge of her nose. The pages were slightly yellowed, soft at the corners, but still perfectly intact. The cover simply read, "If you forget who you are." I didn't rush. I made a cup of chamomile, her favorite, and settled into the window nook as dusk painted the walls with blue-gray light. The first few pages were what I expected: family anecdotes, scribbled thoughts about holidays, handwritten recipes in her loopy cursive. But midway through, something stopped me cold. It was a page with no margin notes, no doodles, just one line, centered. "If she ever turns on you, don't let it erase you. The world is waiting to meet the real you." I read it 3 times before I let the tears fall. Not loud, not messy, just silent streams down both cheeks as the weight of that sentence wrapped itself around my ribs. She knew. She saw it long before I did. She knew Sable might try to rewrite me out of my own story. And she left this little anchor, in the middle of a forgotten box to pull me back to myself. I stayed in that spot for a while, holding the journal against my chest, breathing in the pages. Healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks in unnoticed, carrying a handwritten note from someone who loved you before you knew you needed it. 2 days later, Sable showed up. No warning, no call, just the sound of tires crunching on gravel, a knock on the front door, and then her shape behind the frosted glass. I didn't open immediately. When I did, she stood there with nothing in her hands. No flowers, no apology. She cleared her throat. "I've been advised not to speak." I blinked once. "Then you shouldn't have come." We stared at each other for a second longer. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. She just stood there. I closed the door. No slamming, no yelling, just the soft click of the latch sliding back into place. And that was that. A week after, I got an invitation to speak at a local panel hosted by a women's advocacy group. The title caught me off guard. Silent Strength. When Family Fails You. I accepted. The room was intimate, 40 or so women, ranging from late 20s to women old enough to be my grandmother. Some wore business suits, others came straight from work in scrubs or denim jackets. I sat in a folding chair near the front, knees tucked politely together, hands sweating even as I smiled. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't read from notes. I looked at them, then said, "Healing is not loving again. It's choosing not to bleed where you were once cut." They were quiet for a moment after. Not because they didn't understand, but because they did. Afterward, a woman hugged me so tightly I nearly cried all over again. She whispered, "Thank you. My sister did something similar. I thought I was the only one." That night, back home, I hosted dinner for Elowin and 2 close friends. Just a quiet gathering. No themes, no centerpieces. I served pasta and wine, nothing fancy. But on the table were the ceramic mugs I'd made, the ones Sable had tried to hide. No one moved them, no one replaced them. They sat there, used and appreciated, like I finally was. I'm not the girl who ate the soup anymore. I'm the woman who served the truth. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers, but from the people who once shared our dinner table, our childhood, our silence. This story wasn't just about a poisoned soup. It was about reclaiming truth when everyone else is invested in the lie. Have you ever had to draw the line between protecting peace and protecting yourself? Let me know in the comments, and if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional family stories every week.